Theodosius Dobzhansky, the father of evolutionary genetics. Theodosius Dobzhansky was a Ukrainian-American geneticist known for his contributions to evolutionary genetics, specifically contributing to the generation and shaping of the modern synthesis of evolution theory, which integrates Darwin's evolutionary theory with Mendelian inheritance to explain evolution in terms of genetic variations within populations. Additionally, his name is attached to the Dobzhansky-Mueller model, which describes hybrid incompatibility via chromosomal differences in hybrids and their parents and mates. Dobzhansky is responsible for two different concepts of evolutionary genetics that are at the foundation of population genetics as a whole. Although Dobzhansky has made such a huge impact on the field of population genetics, he, like many people, came from humble beginnings. Dobzhansky was born January 25, 1900 in the city of Nemirov, which at the time was a part of Russia but is now part of Ukraine. Dobzhansky belonged to a family of Russian Orthodox priests, but his father, however, was a math teacher. Nonetheless, he and his family were religious, although Dobzhansky claimed to not identify as a true Christian due to his scientific views. During his childhood and throughout high school, he enjoyed collecting butterflies and ladybugs, which led him to want to become a biologist. He would then attend the University of Kiev, graduating with a degree in biology and specializing in entomology. He would remain at the university until moving to work at the University of St. Petersburg in 1924, where he would focus much of his research on the genetics of fruit flies and find and marry his geneticist wife, Natalia Servetska. In 1927, Dobzhansky would receive a scholarship to work in the United States with zoologist Thomas Hunt Morgan at Columbia University. A year later, he and Morgan would move to the California Institute of Technology, working there until 1940, where he would then move back to teach at Columbia until 1962. He would then move to work at the Rockefeller Institute until 1971, when he officially retired from teaching. He would then pass away on December 18, 1975, at the age of 75. While in California, Dobzhansky would continue to study fruit flies, focusing on their population genetics. These studies on fruit flies provided us with Dobzhansky's first published work in evolutionary genetics called Genetics and the Origin of Species, which is considered to be the most important and influential book on evolution of the 20th century. Genetics and the Origin of Species introduces what is known today as the modern synthesis of evolution theory, which explains Darwin's theory of evolution through mechanisms of Mendelian genetics. Before publishing this paper, it was widely accepted that natural selection was the only evolutionary mechanism that produces new species over generations of time that could only truly be explained mathematically, with omissions to genetic phenomena that couldn't be explained with math. However, Dobzhansky's paper looked to change that idea through his studies using fruit flies, as the data he had obtained not only showed incredible genetic variability within populations, but also fast and almost interchangeable levels of gene presence within populations due to climate conditions, leading the paper to discuss and demonstrate how important genetic mutations are to evolution. Dobzhansky also began to coin the use of the term genetic race as a way to describe how different populations of a certain species differ from each other genetically. The definition of genetic race would vary in Dobzhansky's work, ranging from simpler definitions like array of forms or clusters to Mendelian populations, in an attempt to convey how populations within a species can vary genetically. However, this foundation for evolutionary genetics is not the only thing Dobzhansky is known for. Genetics and the Origin of Species also introduces the foundational concept for the Dobzhansky-Mueller model on hybrid incompatibility. The model states that geographically isolated populations can accumulate mutations, which then cause gene divergence, creating what is known as a Dobzhansky-Mueller incompatibility. When the two divergent populations are reintroduced to each other, sterility of the hybrid species is observed due to these gene incompatibilities. Therefore, this model explains why natural selection favors hybrid sterility, even though sterile offspring would be produced, which somewhat contradicts the generally understood mechanism of natural selection being survival of the fittest, in which case sterile offspring are never the fittest. Dobzhansky discovered the basis for this model after crossbreeding two different species of fruit flies. He would then back-cross the female offspring with males of the pure breeds and determined that of these new sterile male offspring, at least 7 genes on all 4 major chromosomes were involved, confirming gene incompatibility between the two species and thus proposing the Dobzhansky-Mueller model of hybrid incompatibility. Today, Dobzhansky's work can be seen all around us. Hybrid animals such as zonkies or pizzly bears are examples of the Dobzhansky-Mueller model. as although these hybrids do exist and could occur naturally in the wild, they are still sterile, further supporting his model of hybrid incompatibility. Additionally, the academic perspective on population genetics and evolutionary mechanisms like mutation, population isolation, and natural selection that we know of today are in large part due to Dobzhansky's work in Genetics and the Origin of Species and his introduction to the modern synthesis of evolution theory. Additionally, Dobzhansky has written more articles on the importance in viewing biology not just on a molecular level, like most of his work did, but on a wider evolutionary level to help us understand similarities in different forms of life from a wider perspective. In a paper he published in 1973, he wrote about how biology and religion complement each other and how people should not be blind to accept that both hold truth to human life. And he also wrote his most famous quote, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution," end quote. However, this paper does not stand out as one of Dobzhansky's more significant works, which is unfortunate, as some people from both sides of the science and Christian community should read it to have a better understanding of life on Earth. Overall, Dobzhansky's contribution to the field of population genetics cannot be understated whatsoever, as his work in evolutionary genetics is arguably the most important foundation to further studies and understanding of the mechanisms of genetics. As arguably the most important figure in population genetics, Dobzhansky will forever be known as the father of evolutionary genetics.